Good afternoon and welcome to Cornet Global United Kingdom chapter webinar. My name is James Pack and I'm the UK chapter EXCO member responsible for events. Before I introduce you to our speakers, I just want, as always, to say a big thank you to our annual sponsors, IWG, IBM, TP Bennett and Savills, without whose support we really cannot put on nearly as much as we do. And we're particularly grateful to Savills today for leading and assembling today's webinar. I would also like to remind everyone of our up and coming events, details of which are all on the chapter website. 28th of May, we have a one-to-one series with Robert Lewin from BT. The 3rd of June, we kick off the Corporate Real Estate Essentials webinar series with What's It All About with James Crisp from Cushman & Wakefield. On the 4th of June, we continue the one-to-one series with Neil Austin from Omnicom, and again on the 10th of June with Mark Anderson from Whitbread. And on the 25th of June, we have our UK communities leading what really matters in the workplace, in the new workplace environment. And now to today, with the UK government guidance now in place, businesses of every shape and size and sector are working hard to implement plans that balance the health, safety and well-being of their staff with the government requirement to restrict further spread of the coronavirus and to re-energise their communities, their economies as well, sorry. But what can we learn from the experiences of those countries and economies that are further down the post-lockdown road? I'm now delighted to hand you over to Robbie Stewart, who is EMEA Director of Cross-Border Tenant Advisory at Savills, who will lead discussions with colleagues and counterparts from across the APAC and EMEA regions on their day-to-day experiences as they transition back to the workplace and try to restore some semblance of normality. Robbie.
Thank you, James. Good afternoon, good morning for those in the US, and welcome to Cornet's A Postcard From webinar. Myself on the panel would personally like to welcome you on behalf of Cornet for today's session. We appreciate that everyone is particularly busy in various forms of life at the moment, and your time is highly valuable to us. As the sun appears to be splitting the sky in many parts of the UK today, we promise not to keep you for too long. My name is Robbie Stewart, and I work in Savills cross-border advisory business based in London, and I have the pleasure of chairing today's session. There are a number of questions and scenarios that many of you sent through to talk about today, so thank you for taking the time to do that. We have allocated some time at the end for a bit of a Q&A, so please message in during the session anything that you would like picked up, and my assistant James Pack will endeavour to collate throughout the session. It's safe to say these are particularly unprecedented times and vary greatly from anything that we've experienced before. With many European countries easing lockdown procedures and venturing back to the workplace, we too are seeing the initial shoots in the UK, with some schools and many offices operating a phased reopening from as early as next week. We're under no illusions that this will be a return to the norm, but some relaxation, if appropriate, would be a great boost for many. And I can safely say that as much as the last 10 weeks has been enjoyable with a 3-year-old in the house, I won't be shedding a tear when my son goes back to school on Monday morning. With this in mind, the focus of the session is very much on a return to the office and the various intricacies that accompanies that, from commuting to lift entities and so forth. So just before we really get going, to set the scene a little, we held a similar session of this a few weeks ago. And the main idea was almost a less structured version of events from professionals in the Asia Pacific region that have not only returned to offices themselves, but helped occupiers and landlords navigate what is uncharted territory. The world has moved on quite dramatically over the last 3 weeks, and as return to work policies come into place further west from the Southeast Asia and China markets, we've included India in this session today, which is a major market for many of us, and also Germany, which seems to have coped incredibly well throughout the pandemic and are ahead of the curve within the major European markets. There's no perfect solution to a return, and the anomalies associated with geographies, commute times, skyscraper densities will mean we all face an evolving solution. The one rule will determine the return, and we must remain as flexible and as agile as possible. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists, starting with Peter Chan. Thank you, Peter, for joining. It's particularly late in Shanghai, and Peter is at home and has some technical issues with broadband. So just in case there's any mishaps, please forgive him from that side. Peter is the Chief Operating Officer for Savills China business. He was on my first session and has first-hand experience from the C-suite level, not only bringing Savills operations in China back to work, but also overseeing the advice given to a vast range of our multi-sector clients across Greater China. Hi, Peter. As mentioned, we have some technical issues with him, so I'll just move on. Hopefully he can come back in a second, or maybe he was just on mute. The second panelist is Kaustav Roy. Kaustav is based in Mumbai and leads Savills business services operations across India, and has been working closely with various clients across multiple cities within India. Hi, Kaustav.
Hi there. Hi, Robin.
And thirdly, last but not least, Dr. Roman Wagner. Roman runs a workplace consultancy practice across Germany. He's based in Munich, but is advising clients in Berlin and Frankfurt as well. So hi, Roman. Thank you for taking the time to join us.
And thank you. Good afternoon.
James, we are still looking at the presentation, so if you could flick over, thank you very much. I see Peter is there, but he has no pictures yet, so I think he may still have some issues. But we will crack on, and the first question was actually going to be put to him, but we will include Kaustav in that just as it covers off India as well. Could you, Kaustav, from your perspective, just give us a bit of an overview on the effects in business activity and the kind of government responses that have been offered across the region?
Sure. So the country's been under lockdown from March 21st, and it's been pushing out the lockdown dates. And so what we're expecting is that some amount of lockdown to be lifted by the end of this month. Two cities have actually started operations in a very limited manner: Bangalore and Delhi, because these are the two places where the impact has been relatively less, in the suburban Delhi as well as in Bangalore. So there are companies who are gradually coming back, including us in Savills, but we are trying to make sure that their occupancy is not more than 25%, and we're doing rostering, and similarly other companies also doing the same thing. The government eventually did announce some amount of economic measures last week or the last 10 days in a phased manner, but these are more macro in perspective, rather not something which will immediately alleviate occupiers or businesses. Yes, the specific focus has been on the micro and the small and the medium business enterprises. So that's what it is. We are expecting, say, I'm based in Mumbai, and Mumbai has been one of the worst affected. So Mumbai, Pune, some of the other bigger cities like Chennai and Hyderabad are definitely impacted, but Bangalore is a little bit better off, and so is Delhi and the Gurgaon and Noida. These are the three places where we are seeing some activity, but very, very limited.
So you're seeing a split between the major cities, who's coming out of this first and who's going to be lagged behind. So you think Mumbai is further down the pecking order in that?
Oh yeah. Mumbai is way down, because we are doing about 1,500 positive cases a day, and that is definitely pushing things out. So even after the 31st of May, once maybe other cities will open up, but I think Mumbai and Pune is about 150 kilometers from here. I think that's going to take a longer time. Earlier this week, we actually started back our internal flights started taking off. So there are, each of the states have given their own quarantine measures so if one is flying from one city to the other, so you have to take a quarantine. You've got to self-isolate or quarantine yourself for 14 days. So that's something which is happening. And at this point of time, most of the people actually going home. That's another part of the issue, is that there's a huge amount of migrant labor, which is, going around the country, relocating back to their villages. And as of last count, I think that was already something like 5 million people have moved in the last 2 to 3 weeks by train. We're expecting another at least 4 to 5 million people to be moving. So these are, so that's in fact impacting the real estate sector, because these are people who are involved in our supply chain in terms of construction and construction activity.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. We've We had completely lost Peter, but he seems to have rejoined. Hi, Peter. Can you hear us? No, I think we still lost him. We'll move on. There's a few questions focused on China, which we can revisit if Peter joins us. This is, I suppose, to probably both Kosov and Roman. If we start off with Roman, what sort of information have you received from the workforces in Germany about actually returning to work? It's quite a big talking point in the UK about actually people's perceptions of the safety or whether people really want to be going back to work. How's that worked within Germany?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, most companies would like and love to go back to work, to the office, although we can see at the moment that half of the companies that we work with really tend to go back to work. They're returning, for example, 50% of the workforce returns 1 week and half returns to the office the other week. So they are shifting teams. And the other half says...
这你把你的 WiFi 关掉吧。
Oh, a little interference. Yeah, half of our clients are not returning as they fear or they believe the risk is too high, and they simply stay at home working from home and could experience that it works very, very well, and they simply don't want to take the risk to return to the office. So we really 50-50.
把你的 WiFi 关掉，这里也要关掉吗？
Has there been a split between people having to do long
我记得，
commutes?
但是这个关掉了吗？
Sorry, Roman. I was just asking whether there's been a split between the kind of commuter generation as opposed to living in major cities that are happy to go back. Is there a split between the demographic in that respect?
Yes, that's really an issue for the main cities like Munich, Frankfurt, Berlin. So what we see in the outskirts, that most of them traveling or commuting by car, simply as that, trying to avoid public transport, and they are returning easily or more easy to the office, while in more dense cities, yeah, like Berlin, like Hamburg, like Munich and Frankfurt, they really try to avoid the risk.
Okay, and Kostov, you've got quite a large team across multiple cities within India. What's the feeling amongst the employees there about going back to work?
It's tough, let's look at the dynamics in terms of people movement. You've got say when it comes to mass transit, a lot of employees do use mass transit. So when I look at a place like say Delhi, Gurgaon, Noida, that's the national capital region, that does mass transit about say 4 to 5 million people a day. Mumbai does about 7.5 to 8 million people a day. Now the fact is that these have not started. We are hearing that they might start up the Delhi subway system or the metro system hopefully by 1st of June. The Bangalore metro system has really not started, but Bangalore, a lot of people actually use their two-wheelers. It's like this that people, even I've been talking to my colleagues and some of the other clients in Gurgaon and in Delhi and in Bangalore, and they're saying that the employees are a little bit more careful. Some of them are worried. The fact is that you never know who you're going to be in contact with. It's not that we are not in the downswing as yet. We are still pretty much in the upswing, and so that is causing a lot of concern. Yes, clients have tried to manage the situation by procuring laptops and having it packed off, reset and packed off to the employees' homes. But yeah, I think the concern, there's fear. I would say that employees are a little bit more circumspect when it comes to wanting to come back to office immediately.
And then when you tie that into, there's often a lot of overcrowding on public transport within some of the Indian cities. What have you seen between the travel between cities? Because you've got the sort of Gurgaon and Delhi area. Is there easy interaction between the states, or is there restrictions in place?
No. Yeah, in fact, yeah, that brings another complication. I mean, this is like so Delhi, Gurgaon, and Noida are spread across 3 states. I mean, if I were to do a corollary of what happened in the US is like New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey. So everyone coming to trying to get into Manhattan. So the fact is that so Delhi's actually been majorly impacted from the coronavirus, but the fact is that most of the economic activity happens in Gurgaon, which is in another state, and Noida in the other state, and so these 2 states which have got less impacted than Delhi, so they have been on and off shutting down their borders. So people are actually not able to flow easily across the state borders, except for maybe essential commodities. People who have been classified as essential activities, they're able to come, but many people are actually not able to come. We are hoping that sometime by 1st June, those border issues do get sorted out across those 3 states, and there's a little bit more free flow. But at this point of time, I've been speaking to clients who got offices in both in Noida as well as in Gurgaon, and they are saying that, listen, if you have to go to office, if you are staying in Noida, we just go to a Noida office. If you're staying in Gurgaon, we're going to go to a Gurgaon office. We're not going to try and cross borders. It's just crazy.
But you mentioned that internal air travel is picking up, so I presume that the restrictions will be eased on that as time develops.
Yeah, that's something which and the fact that there's a lot more flights actually happening into Delhi, so they have to open up those borders, and because there's a lot of people who are going to be going into Gurgaon, because Gurgaon is a major residential and it's a major office market. So whatever office action which we see is actually in Gurgaon. All our headquarters are in Gurgaon. Savil's office is based in Gurgaon. Noida is another market which is more on the offshoring piece. So you have a lot of the offshoring, some of the tech operations based in Noida. So we are expecting that things should ease up, at least in that part, in terms of the interborder movement. But whether the metro or the subway system opens, that's actually going to be a really tall order. Public bus system, the suburban rail system, I think that's going to take a lot more time.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And Roman, with regards, we noticed in the news either this morning or yesterday about Lufthansa's bailout from the German government. Do you see internal travel increasing within Germany at the moment?
Sure. Yes, we have some other companies struggling, and Lufthansa is not the only one covered by the government at the moment. So we see some others as well. And in terms of public transport, as you were just mentioning, flights and trains and all that, in Germany we have an ease already within the last couple of weeks, but people are really still fearing taking public transport, so they are most possible the cars. So we have again a lot of traffic and jams. So yeah, public transport is still on a very low level in Germany. For business reasons, is allowed. For private reasons, still is restricted.
Okay, thank you. We a lot of people seem to have asked this question. We work in an industry which is fairly relationship and people orientated, and the face-to-face meeting has certainly become a thing of the past over the last 10 weeks, and we seem to be doing things online like this. Unfortunately, I think Peter has fallen off again, and I've been speaking to Peter earlier on the week, and seeing the backdrop of him actually in an office, and he'd just been discussing that he'd been able to have coffee with clients, he'd been meeting clients in certain areas. So the restrictions certainly in China have eased down quite a lot. How have you seen yourselves adapt to face-to-face meetings in, say, India, and where do you see the long-term future with regard to that?
Face-to-face is out of the question. I mean, even at this point of time, so we the good part is that I think we, as well as our clients, have kind of adapted it pretty well. So we are using various technologies to connect up with them, and work is going on. I mean, this morning I was discussing a bunch of test fits with a particular client. Yes, we are kind of debating, and this is a relocation. We are debating how the new workspace is going to be, what's the kind of new operations, what's going to happen. And everybody is actually thinking about that, saying that, okay, fine, you know what, let's kind of pause and figure out how are we going to be working on that, and so that is something which people are getting used to it. Clearly, in fact, I would say that for our clients, we started getting a pushback when we had to meet clients way back in early March itself, where I think everybody was just being a little bit more careful, saying, listen, you know what, let's do a call, let's not meet face to face. If you want, we do a call, let's not meet. So I think a lot of corporates were taking those preemptive measures from early March itself. That time we still didn't have a lockdown. But I think it's a matter of now getting used to it, that this is going to stay. I think in India is going to see that where physical meetings are going to be an issue. Young employees definitely want to go out. They want to go out, go to the bars and things like that. Want to come to office, very keen to come to office. But face-to-face meetings I think is going to take some time.
Interesting. And Roman, from a German perspective, I presume from a workplace sort of vision, you will have been working with clients to see how they readdress this going forward, so that there is a possibility of a face-to-face meeting, but maybe with certain barriers in place or distance restrictions.
Yeah, we will exactly. We are currently working for serious clients, serious clients. We are working on return plans, and we will have face-to-face meetings. Smaller groups, smaller meetings. Half of the meeting participants will join via Teams and others. So we will see meetings, but in smaller groups as well, keeping the social distance necessary. And we have set up plans like technical solutions that you can book meeting rooms for larger larger meeting rooms for smaller participants, for a smaller group, so that every second or third place is in use, and as well that you can only book rooms that simply are big enough for keeping that distance.
Okay, thank you. There's a question that's come in here. I'll just pick it up on it because it's quite sort of related to what we're talking about, and I'll throw this at you, Custer. Do you think, where do you see the value, or do you think employees, where their position is on the value of a face-to-face meeting as opposed to what's been happening now, and whether we'll return to that long term if there is a vaccine or some sort of cure, whether you think that will come back or will integrate more into a kind of online relationship?
Yeah, that's interesting. In fact, I've been talking to various types of clients, across the spectrum. And one is meeting clients face to face. The other thing is actually what are they doing in their own spaces. And like I was talking to an auditing firm, and they said that we never had the concept of work from home, but suddenly we are seeing people are more open to it. We ourselves are changing our philosophy of saying that, okay, fine, you know what, we give that flexibility. A few others, like someone in the financial sector, said that, listen, we always used to work from virtual desktops. So the fact is that even when we went home and worked off the laptop, we were still working on a virtual desktop. So their impact didn't get affected. They didn't get impacted as much. Some clients are saying, you know what, we will give the flexibility to people where they want to work from. Some days they want to come to office, some days they want to work from home or anywhere. That's fine. We'll arrange for more meeting rooms within our properties, and maybe make the office more of a meeting room than a working area. So we are kind of seeing these various things. People are discussing, getting a lot of feedback from their employees, understanding how it works. Because see, there were a couple of concerns which were there, and when it comes to working from home, because one fear was whether we had the bandwidth or no. Okay, I think that's been dispelled. The second worry was in terms of the internet security. I think over the last 2 months, a lot of the technology improvements have happened to try and make sure that the amount of ransomware which gets hits, that's come down. So I think that those two fears have gone off. But yes, in terms of working from home, it is always going to be a bit of a challenge, because let's try and understand that as Indians, we do stay in larger families and less nuclear families. So working from home definitely becomes more difficult. I think people want to come back to office, but I think the scare is still there. People are still worried. They want to come back to office. They want to.
What are the main concerns that they're talking to you about?
Beg your pardon?
What are the main concerns that they're relaying to you?
So I think that their first concern is actually how to get to office. I think that is the first concern, and yes. And I think that's the first concern is getting to office. The second is that I think when it comes to the office environment, they are fairly comfortable with the fact that yes, I think all corporates as well as landlords are taking good enough measures to make sure that there is, the environment is pretty secure wherever they are, the workspace or the building. But I think it's one is the entire commute of getting into office, and second is that between the time they get off the building and into their office, are they meeting with someone in an uncontrolled environment? I mean, if I look at this way that see, India's got a stock size of about 600 million square feet. Okay, out of that, about 300 million square feet or so is managed by the top 9 or 10 landlords. And I've been speaking to all of them. We've been speaking to all of them, and they have also been speaking to each other as to how to protect their occupiers and how to kind of put in SOPs so that the people who are coming to work in their buildings are well protected, or at least prevent incidences. So they are kind of working along those aspects, along with the tenants also are working hand in hand with them to how to make sure that the entire environment from the building and while you work is secure. But the fact is that you've got to keep in mind that you have a lot of housekeeping staff who are coming in, okay, and housekeeping staff, your maintenance staff are actually coming from rather impoverished, places where they stay or they commute, and I think that's where a lot of fear comes from.
And have landlords indicated anything they're going to do about that to kind of counteract it?
So they are taking preventive measures. I mean, you see, let's put it this way: the last two months where it's been locked down and people can't move, so they've tried to actually keep their maintenance people on the site and taking care of them. Making sure that they're comfortable in their buildings, and so that they've tried to make sure that there's continuity of the maintenance. That's what they're trying to do. But going forward, once things open up, eventually you're going to have the housekeeping people coming in and going out. So that always is a concern. I mean, the same thing kind of extends back into our home, because all of us in India have workforce who come in and house helps, and the worry is that, okay, find where the house help is coming from. If the house help is worried as to whether they're going to contract it from their employers, so that's it's the same situation. What's being happening at home is getting replicated in the office.
Interesting. And then the Roman, from within kind of the German office perspective, from the clients you've been speaking to, what sort of changes have you had to implement within the office building itself? I mean, from going through the process in the UK a little bit, just trying to create one-way flow systems, how coffee machines, tea points works. But what have you really been seeing as the big changes?
Most of the changes are in regards of technology and technical solutions. So most of our clients, if they do not have already any sensors and booking systems, that's the first they want to implement, because we want to steer work groups and density, and as well for regulations of public spaces and for cleaning issues. So where you see it, many people use, for example, coffee machines and as well community collaboration spaces, you can have a more intense cleaning and disinfection rate. So that is an issue that we are dealing with at the moment, mostly on the technology issue. For example, as well, we have one of our clients, we have closed all entrances to bring people into the building in just one entrance, measuring the temperature. You know that from Asia, but that is fairly uncommon here in Germany. But already one company is testing that. We are piloting that face recognition and temperature measuring. So that is as well very new for us.
Is that standard from the government, or is that landlords or occupiers taking that decision themselves?
Yeah, they're taking that themselves. We are piloting that, taking our experience with that kind of measurements, and it's a fairly unusual method, as we have high data security issues here in Germany. So face recognition is usually not really allowed, but in this case, we got a high acceptance from the employees, and everyone had to sign really that it is allowed for that company. And yeah, we are testing that.
So is that facial recognition for tracing individuals as like a track and trace system, like an app, or is that heat sensitive temperature testing, which Peter had previously talked about was happening in some parts of China, kind of temperature testing as people go into buildings?
In fact, the system is for both, for measuring the temperature and face recognition. So the face recognition supports the app for booking, and as well, if you want to search for a colleague, to meet a colleague, then you can see who's in and who's probably still in the office, at home.
Okay, so it's almost like when your swipe card goes in, they know if you're in the building. Would the cost of that then be relayed onto the tenant, or is that something that the landlord's joining in with?
Tenant's issue, absolutely. The landlord wouldn't support such solutions.
Okay. Kausto, have you seen anything with that regard within India?
Yeah, no, in fact, I was wanting to add to that. I mean, I'll give an example. In early March, I had flown down to Hyderabad to meet a particular client who had come down from the US, and we were having a meeting. I was staying over at a hotel, and at the hotel, they actually were testing out for temperature. This is in the first week of March, So some of these hotels had already started, and now that's become pretty much de rigueur across all buildings, across pretty much everywhere. I think it'll happen even in offices. And the other thing, what the government has done is that they have brought in an app which everybody they're encouraging everybody to download, and it's already been downloaded close to by about 120 million people across India. It tries to track whether you are whether you there's a chance of you getting affected because you're in close proximity to someone who is tested positive. So anyone who's got tested positive, and right now we have in India about 150,000 people who have got tested positive. So they anyway have to download the app. Even the people who have not got tested positive have to download the app. If you have to get onto the flights, you are supposed to. They encourage you to, to download the app and test yourself, in the sense that whether you've been in proximity to someone who's got tested positive. There was a bit of a discussion on whether it's impinging on privacy or no. But so as of yesterday, they've opened up the source code for that, and on the Android, so that people can check out the privacy issues on that, and whether too much of data is being given out or no. And I think they'll open up in iOS, I think, in a couple of weeks' time.
That's interesting. So, on the last session we had with John Pritchard from our Seoul office talked about whether they have a track and trace system where there had been an incident where someone had it within the office or had been exposed to it in a bar or in a bank. And they initially, within 24 hours, I think is in South Korea, you have access to being tested. How easy? I mean, I think from a European perspective, but correct me if I'm wrong, Roman, it's fairly easy, and testing is widespread across Germany. But in India, how accessible is testing, and are companies looking to help out in that respect?
No, testing is obviously in terms of numbers per million is of course much lower than I think the other more developed nations. But places like in Mumbai, where I think the healthcare system is getting overwhelmed because of the number of cases, generally they expect testing. It takes a bit of time. They've opened up a lot more testing centers. They've opened up the private sector to do testing. So you need a prescription to get tested. So you just can't say that, okay, fine, I want to get tested, so I get tested. You need a you need a medical prescription to get tested. But generally, the results come out in about 2 days' time or so.
Okay.
So that's what it is, and I'll just show the app. I don't know whether it'll show up on the camera. I'll just show it up, and this is how the app looks like. And so you mark yourself out and it says safe. So that's how the app is, and it tracks as to within a 500-meter radius how many people have been tested positive. 1 kilometer, 2 kilometer, 5 kilometer, 10 kilometer radius. How many people have been tested positive?
Okay, interesting. And Roman, in Germany, how does that fit in?
Yeah, I mean, testing is easy to get here, but what we don't have is a tracking and tracing app. We are still waiting from the government. I mean, we are still waiting for that since weeks, and expecting that, like every day, but nothing yet.
Okay, is there a timeline? Do you think? I mean, the offices seem to have gone back without it. Is there a timeline that they're working to, which you think will be hit?
No, we are. I mean, we are having easier regulations from week to week. To be honest, Bavaria, where I live in person, is having still the strictest regulations, but still here it feels like almost normal. To be honest, part of being or going to work, you can almost do everything what you have done before, keeping the social distance, wearing masks for shopping, public transport. A part of that feels pretty normal, to be honest, already.
Okay. Peter has joined back in. Hi, Peter. Can you hear me now? No. So when it goes back to the face-to-face question on meetings, here's live feedback that doesn't always work. Just conscious of the time, we thought we would just give it about another 10 minutes. To Roman, we've seen, or certainly pictures of bars and restaurants or cafes opening with outside space across Germany over the last week, 10 days. How is that working from a logistical perspective? When you're in there, are you allowed to go into the places, or do you have to be served outside? How's a kind of people fear of it, or is there any kind of good sentiment?
As I said before, it feels almost like normal. We are allowed to enter restaurants from last week inside. But you have to wear a mask entering or going to your place, to your seats. So then you can take it off while you're having dinner, and then you take it on again, leaving the restaurant. So that pretty much feels normal. Although, me in person again, I wouldn't love to have a nice, good dinner while the staff is still wearing masks. It feels strange a little bit. And that's why people love, now we have good weather, people love to stay outside, and that's pretty well. Last week, we had an issue again, a new hotspot last Saturday. A restaurant didn't take care of the regulations, obviously, and we have 120 immediately, one day only, 120 new issues. So that's really something we have to deal with. So you have to stay careful. That was again a good reminder. In Frankfurt, a church, they went back to church. And again, 120 people as well. So we have these hot spots. There's just one person or two, and they come together, even taking masks or wearing masks and keeping the social distance. But still, next day, 120 people were infected, and that reminds us Corona is not gone yet.
Yeah.
We have almost normal situations in Germany, but still we have the coronavirus, and we have to take care and deal with it.
And are you limited to the number of people you can go into the restaurant with or a bar with?
Bars are not open yet. A bar is not open. Restaurants are open, and we have restrictions. The numbers of visitors are limited still, yes. It's a bit more than half, but it's limited. But bars are still not open. No clubs, okay. No bars. That's the only thing that is. Cinemas are still not open. Just car cinemas, but not ordinary cinemas.
Okay. And Kaustav, have you seen or any time frames from things like restaurants opening in the most developed of the sort of Indian recovery cities?
No, that's going to be a long haul, because clearly we are seeing a lot of the F&B actually dropping out. I mean, there are several of them, they're just shutting shop because they're just not able to and it's like it's already been 2 months and it's going to get into 3 months. The malls have still not been permitted to be operational, and I've been speaking to the mall landlords, and I mean, they are in discussions with the major tenants as to how they're going to work it out. Because some of them, the big guys are on revenue share basis, some of the smaller guys are on straight cut rentals. So they're trying to see as to how they can work with the retailers on the malls, but malls is going to take some time. And interestingly, I mean, from 21st of March, liquor sale or alcohol sale was not permitted anywhere across the country. And then they, sometime in early this month, they kind of opened it up in a couple of cities, and there was such a rush. They said, okay, fine, they shut it down again. And now they're saying that, okay, fine, you know what, you cannot go and pick up your wine or your whiskey or whatever, but you can actually home order it. So a few of the e-commerce guys are trying to get onto that to actually home deliver your wine and a beer. So, but in terms of malls, so malls I think are going to take a lot more time, but the standalone stores are gradually, we expect the standalone retail shops to come out faster. Yes, they will have their own norms or whatever it is, but I think standalone retail will most probably jump back faster than the malls.
That's interesting. And from then, if you're talking about an e-commerce perspective, I presume that has a large impact on the kind of warehouse or the industrial sector.
Huge. And I think that's one piece which is actually doing really well. And then a whole bunch of deals in the pipeline, where especially on the logistics, the supply chain side, and it's happening all across. Amazon is big, along with Flipkart. Flipkart got bought over by Walmart. So these two are the big guys when it comes to omni product channels. So they are pretty much doing very, very well. And also there are many of the homegrown ones like a Zomato and a Swiggy and a Scootsy. These are more doing the groceries and the restaurants. And the thing is that restaurants, what they are saying is that you cannot serve in the restaurant, but the fact is that you can have it delivered. So that's kind of, they're trying to work out a way of saying that, okay, fine, you can get it delivered. You can, link up with an e-commerce for the delivery and do that, but you cannot bring people into your restaurants.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And I'll just I'll pick on a couple of questions that have come through. Roman, from your perspective, obviously working from a workplace perspective, from the clients you're speaking to, do you think these changes with regards to occupational density levels that you touched at were below sort of the 50% in Germany, that's something that will potentially continue? People will reduce their square footage, or they'll maintain a certain square footage but resculpt the workplace?
It's not so easy to answer. I mean, at the moment, we try to return slowly. As I said, like some parts of the teams, if there is an issue, that not the whole team would be affected. And I personally believe that we will have these restrictions until end of the year if there's no second very hard wave of COVID infections. So if we continue like that, we will still see some restrictions until end of the year, probably autumn until end of the year. And we have just something interesting from an online survey we have just finished. I wanted to state that 1,200 people attended, and we have asked them, because there was a questions before I dropped out. You asked how important would be a face-to-face meeting compared to like online meetings and so on. And we have exactly asked that questions, and people said 70% of our meetings we would like to have face-to-face compared to online meetings. And people really believe that it is very important to come together and to have these face-to-face meetings in terms of cultural values, trust, leadership, and so on. That is very important. And yes, that's why I do believe we need the offices. It's good to work from home and to have possibilities, but still we really want to return to office.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's about finding that balance, and you can probably agree with that, Kostov.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, think of it. We've got something like 25, 28 languages, okay, in the country, okay. And the fact that people have very different backgrounds coming from wherever they are culturally. So for them, the meeting, the face-to-face is so important, because Roman said, is that, to develop the bond or the trust, or to even communicate correctly, because there are so many nuances which are, non-verbal, and someone from the north has a different non-verbal style versus someone from the south, and all those kind of things. I think people really want to meet face to face, whether it's for business or whether it's for pleasure. But I think at this point of time, they are just saying, safety is better than pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. Well, thank you. I see James has come back in to close off. So Roman, Kostov, thank you. Peter, if you can hear us, thank you. Apologies that you had some technical issues, but appreciate your time anyway. Over to you, James.
Robbie, team, thank you so much for that. It was really interesting, and I think also seeing firsthand the problems that many of us face in face-to-face communications. But before we close off, I just wanted to remind everyone of our next event, which is the one-to-one series with Rob Lewin from BT, being in an interview discussion with the UK chapter president, Christina Sigliano. And that's tomorrow at 1400. So with that, I want again to thank Robbie, Roman, Kostov, and Peter for his perseverance and patience, and of course as ever our annual sponsors, IWG, IBM, and Savills, and TP Bennett. Until tomorrow with Christina and Rob, thank you all very, very much. Take care. Stay safe.